Sashes to Sashes is the 7th episode of season 37 of The Simpsons. This is directed by Frank Polcino, and as always there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode chronologically and share some thoughts. And I don't like it. I think it's tremendously boring. There are a couple of good moments that I did enjoy, and I will highlight those as we go through things, but I thought this was really tedious, and I will say it has 6.8 out of 10 on IMDb across only 159 reviews and ratings, but nevertheless, that's a really good score. And I'm pointing this out because some of the other episodes have much lower ratings. So in general, granted it is a small number of ratings, it does seem to be well received. But personally, I didn't care for it at all. It starts off with Mrs. Glick dying, which was a very dramatic beginning, and then the episode establishes the main narrative, which is focusing on the upcoming student council president election, and Mayor Quimby's son, Joe Quimby III, wants to run. We then get a flashback to Quimby's family history, and I thought it was tremendously boring. Really dull, and I did not care for it at all. Lisa then realises that she needs to get Bart elected to save the music programme. When she realises this, we do have some fun animation. The bouncy house is in the background out of a window, and there are various characters just jumping on this bouncy house, and it's such a small, insignificant thing for the narrative, but for me, it was probably my highlight of the whole episode. It was very brief and a lot of fun. We then have another boring Quimby history flashback for about 3 minutes. Really dull. Don't care for it at all. And then Lisa tells Bart that she wants him to run, and she manages to convince him by telling him that if he won, it would drive Skinner crazy. That's all the convincing that he needs, and I believe it. I think that felt very realistic, very believable, because when we first hear that Lisa needs Bart to win to save the music programme, I did wonder how she would convince Bart of this, and I believed that part of the narrative. I think it worked really well. Lisa then finds a rather suspicious photo of young Marge, and we then have another flashback. We see Quimby going up for mayor, and he speaks with Beatrice Bouvier, Marge's aunt, and he asks her to be his campaign manager, and then he proposes to her. And I guess this is the point where I slightly started to enjoy some of the history of the character of Mayor Quimby. I still wouldn't say I ever enjoyed these flashbacks, but they started to feel a little bit more relevant, and they started to feel like they could actually be considered a bit more fascinating and actually giving us more background to the character, whereas the 5 or 6 minutes of flashbacks we get before this, I just thought were completely pointless and really dull. But this part of it, yeah, I don't mind it. I think it makes sense. And it is relevant to the episode. It's not just random padding, whereas the earlier scenes, I think, were just not necessary at all. We're then briefly back with Bart in present day. Then we go back to the wedding, and it's very choppy, kind of getting a lot of whiplash here. I don't think it's very well edited. I feel like we're jumping back and forth far too much. And if the scenes had been longer, for example, we jump back to Bart in present day for a minute at the most, and then we jump back again, and I just think we needed to spend more time with Bart there. We needed to be able to settle into that scene before we're thrown back into the past. I think it's a little too choppy. I think they could have edited it in a way that's a little bit better and doesn't feel as chaotic, so I don't think that was handled very well at all. We then, as I said, we're having the wedding, but then Beatrice Bouvier ends up fleeing because she learns that Mayor Quimby, Joe Quimby, will not treat her the way that he should. And we're then back in present day, and we find out that Joe Quimby III won the election. And Lisa obviously is devastated that Bart didn't win. She says, "Fill your music, please." And the band begins to play the music. And I did genuinely like this bit, because in response to that, she says, "And that's the best they'll ever sound." Obviously, because since Bart didn't win, they're not saving the music programme, and the band will not get any better. I liked it. I thought it was very effective. So that one line from Lisa and the bouncy house animation earlier on were the 2 bits of the episode that I genuinely enjoyed. Everything else wasn't very good. We then learned that Joe Quimby III wants Lisa on his team. That felt really underdeveloped. I don't think we really got very much out of that. And I think they could have done a bit more with that before we got to the conclusion, and I'll come to that in a moment. We then jump back to Quimby in the 80s. Again, kind of pointless. Lisa and Marge then go to see Beatrice Bouvier. We get to hear a bit of her side of the story. I feel like I didn't find it interesting, but I think it was a bit more of a natural way to conclude that part of the narrative. So I don't think that was a badly done scene. I just wasn't emotionally invested. Quite frankly, I couldn't care less. But it was fine. That scene does serve a purpose. It wasn't too bad. And then at the very end, Joe Quimby III gives his speech and actually passes it to Bart. He doesn't want this anymore, so Bart's going to be elected. But actually, it turns out that if the elected president steps down, the next in line is actually the hall monitor, which is Martin, which I thought was quite fun and made a lot of sense as well. I think had Bart won, they'd either have to never mention it again, and we'd just forget that it was a thing, or they'd have to maybe do some more stories with Bart as president, and yes, they could explore that some more, but I wouldn't feel like I would want that. I don't think I would really care that much about that. This episode as a whole, I think, is 50% relevant and 50% padding, boring, unnecessary. It's not a good episode, but there are a few good moments. As a look at Mayor Quimby's backstory, some of those scenes are interesting. His relationship with Beatrice Bouvier, yeah, fine, I don't mind it. I think it works. I believe it. I was buying into that part of the narrative, but a lot of the scenes felt like padding. They didn't add anything. They didn't add anything to my understanding of Quimby as a character today. Again, a couple of them did. And that scene with Marge Lisa and Beatrice Bouvier, yeah, that was absolutely fine as well. The editing back and forth between past and present, it isn't great. It isn't great at all. And I don't think they got that right. So I didn't enjoy it. I don't think that this is a good episode. As I said, it seems to be generally well received across a small number of ratings on IMDb, and obviously I recommend you watch it if you're a fan of The Simpsons anyway. You might really thoroughly enjoy it. I don't think it was a bad idea to dig deeper into Quimby's character, but I don't think the execution was very good at all. And ultimately, I don't think I would skip it if I'm binge watching season 37. I think I'd probably watch it just because, well, some of the flashbacks are kind of annoying, actually. Some of the earlier ones are just really tedious. I don't know. I might skip it. I might not. It depends on how lazy I'm feeling and whether or not I can be bothered to click the next episode button. Either way, I would never choose to watch it again. Sashes to Sashes, in my opinion, is not a very good episode of The Simpsons.